Scientists discovered evidence of an underground lake on Mars. Why do we have this fantasy about life on other planets? It's like being stranded in the desert and seeing a mirage. It gives us hope. Hope of what? I don't know, but at least we're not alone. Hello and welcome to the Fen Den. I'm your host, Sean Allen Fenn, and my goal is to win your hearts and to change your minds. This is the 50th episode of the Fen Den, and I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you so much. I make time for this podcast every week, committed to it. I started last September, and I'm going to at least go through the year and see what happens. So thank you for being with me, and together, you and I can, if we can't change the world, we can change ourselves, right? I realize that I can't change everyone's mind. In the intro, I say that my goal is to win your hearts and change your mind. I know I can't change your mind. Once your mind's made up, your mind's made up. But sometimes you can eventually change your mind. It might not be me who changes it, but at some point, we all continue to grow and evolve, right? That's what makes us who we are. And more importantly, that's what makes us who we want to be, who we are becoming. And my question to you is, who are you becoming? What do you want to be? Because who we are has already passed, even now. Who you were a second ago might not be who you are now and in the future. It's who we're becoming that really matters. And in order to thoughtfully and intentionally create the life that we want, we have to, number one, recognize where we have a limitation that is holding us back from being the person that we want to be, from doing what we want to do and having what we have. We have to recognize the fundamental fears that all of us have, the needs, if you will. One of them being inclusion. We all need to be included. One of the things that happens to us is we have an unconscious aversion to being alone, an unconscious fear of being abandoned, an unconscious fear of losing what we have or what we think we might have, what we don't really even have, but we could have, and if we lose it, we'll be devastated. We also tend to think the grass is greener on the other side. And that's why I brought up the discovery of water on Mars. Whether it indicates anything, whether anything changes, though, is questionable. Because as of today, on July 26, 2018, there is zero evidence of life on other planets. As much as we want there to be life on other planets, there is zero evidence of actual living life. There's a lot of conjecture, and we think it is, well, doesn't it sound plausible that with all of the billions and billions and billions of planets that exist out there, it seems so plausible that there is life on other planets. You're probably right. Mathematically, we can believe that there probably could be life on other planets. When you consider that the conditions for life as we know it, the conditions that are necessary to allow for life at this exact time, it's unfathomable. The fact that on this planet alone, there has been other forms of life besides humans that have existed and have gone extinct. It's mind-boggling when you think about how lucky we are, if you want to consider it that way, how lucky we are to be here at exactly the right time on this planet. The conditions have all lined up against all odds. The best guess that science can make is that there's a 1 in 700 quintillion chance. Trillions and trillions. There's trillions and trillions of planets, but this one is the only one that contains life. This is the only one with the conditions that are just exactly right for life as we know it. It's more likely that we don't want to believe that we're the only ones here. We want to believe that there are aliens. But for all the UFO sightings in the world, there's never been actual UFO proven UFO and alien that has come and had a news press conference and announced itself. And there's never been a UFO that has been on display at a museum that was actually found at Area 51, because it's all just myth and legend and YouTube videos. But there is zero proof of life on other planets. That's not to say that there does not exist entities that we can't fathom and we can't see. It's kind of spooky, but that's totally possible. The fact is, nobody knows, nobody can prove a thing. But the reason I bring this up is because I think it taps into this fundamental longing to belong to a bigger thing than ourselves, and to feel like we're all alone in this thing actually gives us too much pressure, because we're the only ones, we're in charge of this planet. There's no alien that's going to come visit us and give us all the secrets that will make civilization better and will end war and poverty. There is none of that. There's only us. And that could be either terrifying or it could be an honor. We're the ones in the entire universe that are doing and being and everything. We're the ones who are living. That's it. We're special. What have you ever thought about it that way? What if you really are the center of the universe? I know that we're not literally the center of the universe, but in a sense, we kind of are. We are at the same time important and totally unimportant. Simultaneously, we are everything and we are nothing. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because you are the only one experiencing life exactly as you are right now. As you're listening, you are listening to my words and you're hearing them and you're interpreting them a certain way that another person is not. In so doing, you are creating your perspective on the collective consciousness that is making everything happen. If we're the only ones doing it, maybe there are aliens that are also perceiving their alien world and driving their little UFOs. Maybe they are, but so far we got no proof about that. So it's only you. And what if it is only you? What if the decisions that you make and the things that you're concerned with affect you, and you know other people matter, but they really don't matter before you. In other words, you are the captain of your own ship. And what you concern yourself with will result in your perception of the world. If you worry about constantly afraid of getting sick, then you will be sick. If you're constantly afraid of not having enough, then you won't have enough. If you are only looking out for yourself, then you are like other people who only look out for their self, and you're probably a jerk. However, if you are a person who realizes that it's not about you, that we exist to benefit others, we exist as ourselves in our bodies in the world to help other people to be their self and to be their bodies in the world and to move through the world helping other people, thinking it's not about you, but the collective, the wider amount of people, the wider group. We feel the reason the wider group matters. The wider group is the dominant reality. That's not to say that getting on the bandwagon is the smartest thing to do, but it is when you need other people and you have this fear of not being included. And we all have it. That's why we like exclusivity. And that's why we like being VIP. And those things exist for a reason. There is a time to be inclusive, but there's also a time to exclude. Exclude people who are not ready for you. The idea that we are alone in the world excludes the possibility of other civilizations on other planets. Just for a moment, with the hypothesis that, go with me with this hypothesis, this thought experiment, just for a second, because we actually have not found life on other planets, we can right now presume that we are the only ones here, as much as we want to believe that there are other civilizations on other planets. But so far there are not. So far there are not that we know of, even though we get signals, like scientists have signals from other places in the galaxy, and so sure, anything's possible. But so far, we're the only ones. That means other people, other civilizations that are not us, are excluded from our equation. Therefore, everything that happens to us is because of us. The pressure that can put on someone thinking that you're the only one who is in charge of your circumstances is frightening, because you can't blame someone else for your circumstances. Some people are born into some atrocious circumstances. Just being here, alive on this planet, in the free world, that makes us really lucky. But that also gives us the responsibility to help people who are less fortunate than us. And if we only think according to ourselves and our own needs, on the one hand, we do have the ability to exclude what doesn't serve us. And I think it's actually smart if you do that. Being able to say no, knowing what not to do. A good musician will know when not to play. A good artist will know how to use negative space and know where not to paint. There's a thing in the universe called antimatter that seems to know where not to be. There are particles that are called positrons that are actually electrons that are going back in time. You heard me correctly. Electrons go back in time, and they exist as positrons. It's a little bit beyond what I can explain right now, but trust me, it will blow your mind. That is one of the reasons why we have to be able to accept a paradox. There are paradoxes that allow us to be more than one thing at a time. So you are important and unimportant at the same time. The possibilities of your life and what you do, they are in a state of superposition, meaning you can be anything that is probable. Anything's possible, but we are confined to this rule set that force us into probability. In other words, you might not be the President of the United States. As much as you want to be the President of the United States, you may never be that. Which means anything's possible, you could be, but you weren't. And it's not probable that you are. Our current President of the United States, it was probable that he did become the President. As bizarre as it all is, it was totally not only possible, but it was probable, because the circumstances were set up for that to happen. So the circumstances are set up for you to do what you are supposed to do in the world, on this planet. The circumstances are caused by you, not entirely, because we can't control the weather, but the decisions that you make according to where you are in your state of your mind, if you're in a state of desperation or if you're in a state of peacefulness, according to the limited information that you have. Your decisions, your outcome will be either positive or negative, depending on how you look at it. According to your potential, you might miss out on what you could have done and what you should have done, and at the same time, you don't want to should all over yourself. So don't beat yourself up if you make a bad decision, because all mistakes are a gift. I think mistakes and imperfections and things that don't work out exactly like we want them to be our chances to learn from. But we actually do have to learn from them, or we will continue to make the same mistakes. And in order to do that, to learn from them, to not make the same mistakes, you have to be aware that you don't have all the information. And you have to act with limited information. That's why that's why we jump to conclusions. That's why we make assumptions, because we don't have time to get all the information. We just can't possibly know it all. Because as soon as you think you know what you forget that you don't know what you don't know, and pride comes before a fall, and before you realize it, you are not as good as you thought you were. And the only way that you can become better is by, number one, actually deciding to become better and accepting that you don't have all the information, and you've never arrived. As much as you think you've arrived somewhere, you've never arrived. Number two, by excluding things that don't matter. Excluding you sometimes have to exclude people. There's such thing as access. That's why people get VIP passes. All access passes. Not everyone gets an all access pass. Could you imagine if anyone had access to celebrities? They would get no peace, and they would not be safe. And a person becomes a celebrity because they are set up to become a celebrity. So if it's fame that you want, you have to know when not to play. You have to know where not to paint. You have to know who not to allow access to you. You have to know who to exclude and who to include. And the only way you can do that is by knowing what you want, knowing that the way to get better is by surrounding yourself with someone who's better than you. If you're the smartest person in the room, then you plateaued because you're not learning anything. You're not challenged by someone who knows more than you. Be able to admit when you're wrong, and not being so stubborn in thinking that you're right. Always test your assumptions. A common mistake that people make is assuming that because they perceive the world to be a certain way, that automatically means that everyone else has the same perception of the world. I was helping a friend with his marketing, and he insisted that no matter what the evidence was to the contrary, he wanted to do it his way. And I said, do you want to be right, or do you want to be rich? And maybe I said it with too harsh of a tone, but he got mad and offended that I said that. How dare you say, do you want to be right, or do you want to be rich? And people get sensitive. That's gonna stop you from being an entrepreneur if you're too sensitive, and if you don't recognize your biases. That not just because you think something is a certain way, you just automatically think that is how life should be, and that is how everyone else is. And guess what that is? It is pride, and pride comes before a fall. So don't be surprised if no one buys your product or your service because you assumed that your way is the best way, and and that's why your thing is so good, is because you made it. Well, again, you are not special. You are not important. And at the same time, you are important because you actually can give something to the world that is valuable because of your unique perspective. But you can't be prideful about it. That's the difference. Be confident, but don't be prideful. Be certain, but don't be arrogant. While people can be overly sensitive, don't worry about those people. At a certain point, you have to deny access to overly sensitive people. Because if you listened to everybody, you're going to fail. If you listen to everybody, you're going to fail. You cannot listen to everybody. In fact, you have to ignore most people. That's what I mean by only granting access to people who are smarter than you. Okay, I'm not going to listen to everyone. I'm not going to take advice from someone who is not a millionaire. They are never going to be a millionaire. They live like someone who is not going to be a millionaire. And I'm only using that as a measurement. I don't believe that money is everything. You have to decide what measure you're going to use, because by the measure that you use, that will be used on you, which means if you measure with intangible things, then you are going to be measured intangibly, which can be impossible to measure. You just have to be really clear on what you want, and really clear about how you're going to measure it, and really clear about who you let into your universe, because you are the center of your universe. At the same time, you're not important, but you are important. Do you understand? We are made in the image, in the shadow of the divine creator, which means that we are as important as the creator, and we are unimportant as an appendage. In other words, if you get a pain in your little toe, you could do a couple things. You could either ignore it or chop it off. What would you rather do? Are those the only two options? No, because that would be a binary black or white world. You could take an Advil. You could put a Band-Aid on it. You could go to a doctor. There's a bunch of things that you could do, but you would be overly sensitive if you let that occupy all of your attention. It's just your little toe. It's important, but it's not important. Do you understand what I'm saying? You are not the only one. Somewhere, someone has gone through what you're going through. You're not alone. Someone else has gone through what you are going through. You never have to feel like you are alone. In that way, you are not special because someone else has gone through it already. And in that way, you are special because no one has gone through exactly what you are going through. But someone can relate, because every problem is a species of a problem. In the same way that every particle is talking quantum physics again. Particles are identical as a species. So while they have variation in what they do and the way they move, depending on their spin, they are identical. On a quantum level, everything is the same. Every particle is, number one, it's a potentiality, depending on the observer, meaning it how light can be a wave and a particle. The particle is where the particle lands depends on where how the observer measures it. So as the quantum observer, you are not special and you are special at the same time. And you can affect your outcome, and you can affect what you put forth into the world, and be sure that that is what you're going to receive. Just like when you smile at someone, it causes their mirror neurons to fire and they smile back at you because we recognize the familiar. I'm going to conclude this 50th episode of the Fen Den with your host, Sean Allen Fenn. I'm so glad I can do this for you. Click like, subscribe, follow. Let me know if there's anything that resonates with you. I'm going to end with something that I recorded earlier this week about how to affect change in your life and how to create the life that you want with the simplicity of a smile. Have you ever smiled at someone and they smiled back? They smiled at you and you smiled back, and you didn't know them, but you sensed a familiarity with them. That is the illusion of separateness being dropped for a second. There is a familiarity because we all are one. Before you accuse me of getting too hippy-dippy or woo-woo about this, on a quantum level, all particles are the same species. They are identical. That means that everything is one thing. And that's assuming that particles are the fundamental building blocks of reality. In the quantum world, the very act of observing and the very act of measuring affects the outcome. In other words, whenever you look at a system, whenever you measure a system, the system changes. Now that system is a wave of potentiality. Wherever that particle lands is because of the observer. The decision for the particle to land in that place and be that particle is entirely because of the measurement used. It's that sense of familiarity where in a split second you can decide how you observe, and you will instantaneously affect that other person. So if you smile, chances are they will smile back. And if you frown or if you scowl, chances are they will feel the same way, because you give what you get and you get what you give. And that is completely true on a quantum level and a physical level that you and I can see with our eyes and touch with our hands, and you can feel and sense. When you extend that through your life, and don't just think of it as just some weird thing that you don't understand, but actually use that information to affect change in your life and choose to see things with the potential that you want to see, instead of seeing the worst possible scenario, which has its place to be skeptical. You should certainly be skeptical, but there is power in choosing to see the potential in someone. When you look at that person, you can see through the eyes of potential, of the best possible outcome. And everything, your finances, your love life, your health, your surroundings, all of that can be affected by the observer. And the measure that you use will give you the measurements that you expect.